and knowledge leads to attitudes, and education leads to attitudes, but it has to change attitudes in order for behavior to change. So I created an Emerging Adult Financial Capability Survey. Been doing that for the last 3 years across campus. There's a Finance 1904 class, two classes in my department. I have a couple other universities, and University of Michigan's one that we're gathering some, and then it's translated into Portuguese, and I have a colleague in Portugal that is gathering gather some data. And so we're now starting to look at these pre-post tests of what type of engagement and activities and assignments lead to this change in attitude and behavior. And again, retention, graduation rates, time to graduation, student debt is on the heels of that. So here's some findings of mine from attitudes, and it shows that if you change the attitudes really what gauges and leads the behaviors. Students who felt in control of their finances, and you may think, well, this is common sense, but not necessarily, had significant less total debt. They felt in control of their finances. Those who felt finances were a significant worry or hassle, which is many of them, had significantly more total debt. Those who reported, and this isn't all females, there's some males in here too, that purchasing things was very important to their happiness. These outcomes were less likely to budget, felt significantly less sure about their ability, had higher credit card debt, and were more likely to use credit cards to make purchases they could not afford. So they're out there doing behaviors, not really thinking too much about it, because their attitude of it makes me happy, I'm compulsive, I need this, I deserve this, I worked hard, I want to do this, that gauges behavior. And so they could have all the knowledge in the world that this isn't a smart idea, but their behaviors don't show that. So, in order to have activities, or what are those activities that change these attitudes, here's some ideas. I showed you a couple with tracking. But we do an investment game through the whole semester where they have fake money of $100,000 and it's real time linked to the stock market. And they go in and they're investing and they get points and things and bonus points for those who do the best in that game. And they're learning different ways of investing, how easy it is, and they see how much their money grows, or if they're risky in these different investments, how they can lose it. And just by doing that, it gets them to understand what a stock is and a bond is and how to invest and where to go to find resources. And doing that, that's a hands-on student learning or centered learning approach. The debt snowball. There's ways to get out of debt. You pay the minimum to everything, and then you put all your extra money to one, and then once that's paid off, you put it to the next one and the next one until it's all paid off. And they do that with their own debts, or pretend debts if they don't have any debt, and see how quickly. Now, if you put a mortgage in there, and you had, say, 2 credit cards, a car loan, student loans, and a home mortgage with 28 years left, you could be out of debt in about 12 to 13 years, including your home mortgage, and save about $300,000 to $400,000 in interest. And so as they go and do those things, and then reflect in journaling, taking students from where they are now to thinking ahead of where do I want to be financially? What's my career goals, and where do I want to be, and how comfortable do I want to be, and what's my goal? And then what I'm doing now, where's that leading me? Well, I don't want to be there, I want to be here. These type of things are trying to help. The whole purpose is to shape their attitudes. And so engaging students differently to have this paradigm shift to be, this isn't just knowledge, but I want to have the rich mentality, which is save, pay cash. Don't use interest to build wealth rather than paying interest. Rather than the poor mentality is I want it now, I'll buy on credit, pay now, or buy now, pay later, those type of things. They track their spending for a month and then find again these types of spending leaks. So some final thoughts. Again, just to reemphasize, is my goal isn't to teach knowledge, but it's to change attitudes and behaviors. It's to engage them so that they can change this paradigm and think about the future. And it's hard for college students sometimes to think about the future. Think they're in the kind of here and now, and they are like investing, retirement, that's not me. I'm just worried about, student loans. Talk to me about student loans. Well, if you can bring some of these all together and help shape attitudes, then their behaviors throughout these things will change, which is beneficial. So my invitation to you, in conclusion, is it is Financial Capability Month. So I want you to not only think about one thing you could do that would have a positive impact on your financial well-being, but then to actually do it. So that's my invitation to you. You can take me up on that, but again, just remember, if you don't, then this financial literacy month is going to go to waste. So you do want to do that. Last thing I'll say is, my research, I gather the data from the students. I get these findings, I share them with my students. It changes the types of activities I do and what I do in my classroom. They share with me, and that shapes the questions I have for my research. So it's really a blended research influencing my teaching and teaching influencing my research. And I really appreciate this work. Thank you.
Okay, next we have Dr. Susan McRae in the Department of Biology, who's going to talk about increasing teaching with scholarship, taking the student out of the classroom and into the real world.
I don't know what they were using for. Do you have
The basics.
So thank you very much to the organizers. Thank you all for coming. My talk is infusing teaching with scholarship, taking the student out of the classroom and into the real world. I just wanted to point out the photograph that I selected and submitted for this. Several people asked me, how did I do that with that bluebird? And I'll just assure you it's not magic. It is not sort of Snow White charming tactics, and there's no mealworms involved. I'll tell you in a few slides how I did that. So, oops. Okay. So out of the classroom and into the real world. So most of you know that I'm an ecologist and I do a lot of work in the field, and so I am going to talk about some field classes and field work. But I really want to start by talking about out of the classroom and into the real research realm. The research lab connotes scientific lab, but this applies to all fields, bringing students into our research. I will also later talk a little bit about bringing students out into the field in field labs and also further afield through study abroad. And mainly, though, I want to start with this because it's really a celebration of the accomplishments of some of our best students. So what I mean by into the research lab is the mentored undergraduate research that we provide. And for myself, coming from an undergraduate institution that was a fairly large public institution, being invited to join the research lab was a very, very profoundly opening situation to my personal career. So it was a real boon to my self-esteem, being invited to be part of a lab with graduate students and other peers that were similarly interested in research and science. I wanted to provide that kind of experience also for our students here at ECU. So this is basically what motivated me to get involved in mentoring undergraduate research here. And one of my first honor students, Alexandra Stang, was an excellent student. She was in the honors program. She was an EC scholar. She did many things in the 3 years that she was with me in my lab. Starting out before I even had a lab space, she did a literature review and reconstructed the evolution of a trait, undertail, color. These are some rails, members of a family of birds that I'm very fond of. And she reconstructed this trait. As you can see, the black lines in this phylogenetic tree represent all the species that have white tails. And she actually explored a variety of different hypotheses and was able to reject different possible reasons for the evolution of white tails, coming to the conclusion through her comparative analysis that these tails are selected for by being in open habitats rather than in concealed habitats. And this supports the enhancement of an anti-predator signaling function. And she was able to publish her research in quite a respectable discipline journal, Evolutionary Ecology, and now she is a doctor. Dr. Stang is a resident in internal medicine at the Brody School of Medicine, just finishing up her residency actually. And so she's really done a lot. She also did research in chemistry at the same time. She did some research in statistics, really a very accomplished individual. But my one regret was that I wasn't able to offer her the distinction of honors in biology for the work that she did with me, because that didn't exist at the time that she did her work with me. So I proposed her a white paper to my faculty that we try to instigate a program of honors within our department. My principal aims were to develop a new course, biology honors thesis, that had a standardized set of assessments and requirements for completion, and importantly, also to be able to extend the opportunity to a broader cross-section of students. Alex was in the Honors College, but I've also had students that, for whatever reason, they were not able to be in the Honors College. Some were transfer students, some were students that were from out of state, and they were unable to get university honors or any kind of distinction for this kind of work. And so we were able to, with the support of my chair, Jeff McKinnon, and the director of undergraduate studies at the time, Mary Farwell, we were able to instigate this new course and this new program, allowing for students to get the distinction with honors in biology on their transcript. So the distinction comes with completion of the course, Biology Honors Thesis. All the students are required to submit a formal research proposal approved by their faculty mentor. There's a standardized assessment of the thesis paper itself and also of a defense of that thesis by the mentor and also a second faculty assessor. There's a compulsory public research presentation, which most students complete here during research and creative activity week. And then class meetings cover best practices in writing, in the peer critique of abstracts, and practice presentations and things of that nature. Some of the assessments, I realize that's probably too small to read, but this is the assessment rubric for the thesis and also for the defense, again, assessed by 2 faculty mentors. But at the risk of putting way too much writing on a slide, I wanted to show you, since we started this program in 2010, the 20 theses that have now been completed in biology under this model. So I'm enormously proud of the fact that our students have really come out and done these theses and done really great work, some of which has been published. And I'm also very proud and indebted, in fact, to the mentors that have supervised these students. So in brackets beside the student's name, you'll see the mentors' names. And there are 16 faculty mentors on this list. Most of them are from biology, but also there are mentors from Brody School of Medicine and also from psychology and some other departments. So this has been a very successful program, and in fact the Honors College has taken this on board as a model that now other departments are using for their own departmental honors programs. In addition, when I mentor my own students in this program, I usually require that they at least attempt to apply for research funding. The URCA program has been a tremendous boon for this. Again, Dr. Farwell, as the Director of Undergraduate Research on campus now, has been very successful in implementing this program across the campus. And undergraduates in my lab have also been successful, in fact, in getting funding from outside of the university, external sources such as the Pitt County Wildlife Club and the Carolina Bird Club. I expect the same standard of my graduate students, and we currently, all my graduate students are working on on a funded research project it's funded by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, so we're studying the behavioral, the ecology, and the conservation of the king rail, which is a threatened species that breeds on our coast. All of my graduate students working on this project have additionally applied for and received their own funding from a variety of organizations. Amanda is sitting in the audience here today. She just heard that she won the Francis Peacock Scholarship from the Garden Club of America, so she's done very, very well. So I think it's really important that students are encouraged to submit their proposals to these sorts of funding bodies, because it's a nice item for them to have on their CVs, and also it gives them ownership of their projects. Their projects they can really call their own. Now, that's not to say that every single student I've ever had has been a tremendous success. I've also had students that have struggled. Maybe they haven't achieved the high standards I expect of them. But what I would say by advice to prospective research mentors is don't let the rough experiences sour the good ones. Particularly, I think even if students don't go on and research or don't succeed in finishing a thesis, they do get a lot of meaningful education from the experience of being engaged in a research project. And to my surprise, many of the students I have mentored, both in research and also as teaching assistants, have gone on to become teachers. Teachers in schools, but also teachers in community colleges. And they transmit some of that enthusiasm for scientific discovery to the students that they teach and mentor themselves, and recognize that those are people that we don't have direct access to. So my point here is that your reach is actually farther than you know. You're actually transmitting some of that enthusiasm to people beyond the people you meet directly. So the next part of my talk is into the field, so out of the classroom into the field, and this is where I can reveal to you the secret to the bluebird here. I'm actually holding its feet, so it's just perched on my hand. This is a bird that I caught in a box trap, and this is for the purpose of banding it. So I have a long-term research project at the West Research Campus where we are banding bluebirds in order to study their behavior and ecology over time. And I'll just say that I'm a licensed bird bander, so don't try this at home. So field labs. I've been involved in field labs in a variety of different courses. Currently on campus, I teach ornithology lab, animal behavior lab, and field zoology lab. And all of these involve outdoor activities for students. And these are really the original active learning venues. So lab sections in general are the active learning venues that have been used in science for many, many years. And the philosophy is that long-term retention of concepts is reinforced by seeing and doing. So it's, in other words, experiential learning. And students, for example, in my field zoology lab, which is going on right now, I will be teaching at this moment, except for my wonderful grad student, Jan, is out doing it for me, just for today. So the students in this lab contribute to this study of bluebirds by setting out boxes at the West Research Campus. And we're fortunate here in North Carolina that the college term extends through the period of settlement of these birds when they're just getting started on their nests. So they actually watch the birds get started, building their nests, laying the eggs, and towards the end of the semester, some will have hatched, and the students get to see all that in helping with this monitoring. In addition to helping with the Bluebird project, the students are also learning in the first part of the course how to identify a variety of local bird species as well as insects. So we only identify the insects to the taxon order, but the birds, we identify the species. And they apply these identification skills to making quantitative sampling of the abundance and the diversity of both birds and insects during the period between March break and the end of semester. So this is the spring migration period here. So what they see inevitably is the increase in both the abundance and diversity of birds and insects, which are bird food, throughout that period. And each student then uses that class data set to write their own individual report. And all of these reports are slightly different because they use different aspects of the data set. Some of them look at clutch size of bluebirds. Some of them look at settlement dates. Some of them look at the diversity of birds increasing over time. Some of them relate the insect abundance to the bird abundance. And so the skills that they gain from this class is that they learn to work in teams for the sampling. They learn the sampling techniques for the different species. They manipulate and analyze time series data, and they learn to write professionally. And this, I've just given you one example. This is a figure from one of the students' reports a couple of years ago. She was interested in comparing the sections of the West Research Campus that had been subject to prescribed burn versus sections that were not burned. And she looked at how insect abundance measured in 3 different sampling techniques, and bird abundance, how it changed over time, over the 6 weeks between March break and the end of semester. And she found significant differences where the insects were more abundant in the unburned areas of the site than in the burned areas of the site in each case. So there's a switch over here. And yet the bird diversity didn't, bird abundance, this is not diversity, the bird abundance did not change over that. It did not differ between those 2 treatments over that period of time. So that concludes what I wanted to say about the field zoology class on campus. Now I would like to take you a little further afield and tell you a little bit about the study abroad course that I've been involved in for the last 6 years. So we teach a class in Panama, study abroad in Panama, tropical field ecology. There are actually 2 courses offered. Marine field ecology is taught by Dr. Joe Luskovich, and he teaches that class on the Atlantic coast and the coral reefs. And we teach a course on terrestrial field ecology. This is taught by Kyle Summers and myself in Gamboa, Panama, which is right on the Panama Canal that you can see here. Here's Gamboa town. Gamboa was my home, actually, for a little over a year before coming to ECU. And it's the one of the main sites for the Smithsonian Tropical Research Institute. And so we teach these courses in facilities of the Tropical Research Institute, and therefore have access to many of their resources. So the highlights of the course that I help to teach, terrestrial field ecology, are twice daily excursions to explore tropical rainforests, lectures that reinforce concepts and include guest speakers. A lot of the staff scientists do formal and informal demonstrations for us, readings that highlight research that's conducted at the Institute. Students always conduct independent research projects in pairs while they're there, and most of them elect to write those projects up on return to ECU for writing intensive credit. The assessments for this course include a field notebook, laboratory practicals, oral project presentation on the research they do there, and a theory exam. And the main thing is that our students have access to, in a very informal situation, world-class scientists based at the Institute. And so that's a remarkable asset. So they're actually able to see and interact with really very accomplished scientists that they see as real people because we're living amongst them. So just a few highlights of the course. This is taken from the top of the canopy crane. This is the same crane the STRI scientists use to do their sampling in the canopy and at various levels in the forest. So we take them in the crane, drop them down to different levels in the forest to look at the different fauna and flora that are found at the different levels. This is the gondola. We go out on excursions every morning. A lot of it is bird watching because there's a tremendous diversity in the forest right around Gamboa. But what are they looking at? Maybe howler monkeys. This is the sort of experience you just can't get on campus. And further immersing them in the forest really allows them to get a full understanding of the difference between the tropics and the temperate zone. So they can take a field ecology course here, and I can stand in a classroom and tell them what the tropics are like, but here they're actually experiencing it. They feel the heat, they understand, they get rained on every day, and they experience the 12-hour days in July, so they understand what the tropics are like because they're there. They're actually in the tropics, and we take them out at night and they see what goes on at night. There's a completely different set of animals that are active, and they're really very engaged. We also include cultural activities, and these are very popular. The Indigenous people in this community, the Wunan community, are friends, and they give interpretive presentations on ethnobotany and so on. And finally, I'd just like to say that, engaging the students in the field, in the lab, in the field again, and through demonstrations by Smithsonian scientists really enforces learning in this particular environment. Our students tell us, oftentimes recognition in our field comes from the bottom up. It's the students that provide the recognition on a daily basis. They tell us how much they love the course. They tell us how much they've learned and what a great experience they have had. And these experiences force them to consider new possibilities for their own career trajectory, and many of them have begun to consider research as a career for the first time when they experience that. So with that, I'd like to conclude, and I really would like to thank very much the Scholar Teacher Awards Committee this year, Dorothy Mueller, Joyce, and the staff of the Office of Faculty Excellence, Dean Sutherland and the HCS staff, particularly my chair, Jeff McKinnon, who's been extremely supportive, and Mary Farwell, who is now the Director of Undergraduate Research, but also was very supportive and instrumental in developing the biology honors thesis. My other colleagues in biology and across the campus, my students especially, to whom I'm extremely indebted, and my family and my friends. Thank you very much.
Looks exciting.
You're going to have to help me come out in the last thing.
I do this summer.
Okay, next we have Dr. J. Dr. J is from the School of Music, and he's going to talk about examining the influence and development of social intelligence on effective music teaching. Do you have a...
I do, yeah. Let's give her a chance to go. We all come with all our tools, goodies. I've got cookies for you.
Good afternoon. Thanks so much for again for this award. And just starting out, we'd also like to thank those that made the nomination possible. Department Chair Michelle Harrison, to our interim director of the school music at the time, Scott Carter last year, to our new full-time director of the school music, Chris Olfers, and to the dean of the College of Fine Arts Communication, Chris Butto. Thank you very much, as well as my colleagues who make it fun to come to work on a daily basis. The question that I posed to you to start with, what makes a good teacher, is probably one that we've thought about quite a bit. I'm sure there's not anyone that hasn't had a student in class, been a parent themselves, been in class, or been a teacher that hasn't thought about this answer. And for most of us, we pretty much know the answer to it. We know what makes a good teacher. We can see it. We can pick it out. We see someone in the class who engages students and captivates their interests, is effective in transmitting information. So we know what good teaching is. But then when we start to break it down by what are the components of that, or what individually is going on that makes them good, it gets a little bit dicier, because we come to find out that sometimes not all the parts add up. It's difficult to break things down individually to find out exactly what makes somebody an effective teacher. And so in looking through a lot of the research on not just what makes effective music teachers, but effective teachers in general, over the past 60 years, there's been this trend that's come about that says that effective teachers are those that are able to understand what's going on with their students in the classroom and then use that to their advantage and interact effectively with their students to find a way to connect with them and teach with them. Within music education, we have many studies that have shown that, you know what, social skills are actually the most important attributes that the teacher could have to be successful as a teacher. And an example, this quote right here, I found very interesting, which says, you know, music teaching doesn't exist in a vacuum. We're dealing with students, and we're constantly interacting with them hundreds of times within any given setting. So if we try to come up with a term, what exactly is this that allows certain individuals to be good at having these interactions with students? What makes them effective in their classroom? One definition of this that's received a lot of attention lately is called social intelligence. And social intelligence first was defined in 1920 by Edward Thorndike when the U.S. Army charged him to come up with a way to find out how can we bring enlisted servicemen into the service and figure out where they're going to best fit the U.S. Army. What are their skills? What can we do with them? And so he was trying to come up with different ways to define intelligence and figure out who's going to be good at what. You might have heard of some of these other referrals of this as well. Street smarts, the term that's thrown around quite a bit. Howard Gardner, if you think of the theory of multiple intelligence, that's very famous, calls this interpersonal intelligence. And it's also been referred to as practical intelligence. But the idea is basically the same. Daniel Goleman, in 2006, wrote a very famous book called Emotional Intelligence, in which he talked a lot about what he had been working on with a lot of the Harvard researchers and pedagogues there. And also looking at not only what makes good teachers, but what makes good nurses, what makes good social workers, what makes good behavioral therapists, people who are involved in daily activities where you're working with individuals. What makes them good at what it is they're doing? How do they interact? And so he basically came up with the theory that it's based off of two categories. First of all, what we sense about others. What can we pick up from people from nonverbal cues? What sort of awareness do we have of what's going on? But then the second part of that is, what do we then do with that information? Some of us can be very good at picking up information, but if you're not able to use that in a way that helps you be advantageous in the situation, then it's not necessarily social intelligence. So for him, the essence of the social intelligence was this ability that you can not only decode the information, but then use it to interact effectively. So when I started thinking about, well, how else could we possibly measure this in music education? Because nothing to this point had really ever been done until a few years ago as far as how can we possibly measure intelligence and then see if that's related, or not just intelligence, but social intelligence, and see how it's related to effective music teaching. The first thing we need to come up with is, how are we going to measure it? And so there is a performance-based measure of social intelligence that was worked on in the 80s. In fact, many of these authors who worked on this were colleagues of Daniel Goleman when he was at Harvard, which kind of gave him the idea of going through and talking more about social intelligence. And so this interpersonal perception task 15 is basically a series of 15 little 1-minute video clips that you'd watch. And within that, you'd have a multiple choice answer that you would fill out at the end of each scene. So for example, you might be watching a man and a woman sitting at a table having a conversation. And after 45 seconds, the question would ask, Have they been in a relationship for 10 months or 3 years? Well, how are you going to know that? Other than the fact that you have that social awareness, or you able to pick up the cues between them to decide, what is the correct answer with that. So having a performance-based measure of that was a great way to start. Now we got to find some teachers that we can basically test it on. And so to do that, we really needed to find both effective teachers and ineffective teachers, or to be front good teachers and bad teachers, right? So what I had is a panel of experts, university faculty members, principals, art supervisors, music supervisors, and counties come up with who are some of your exemplary teachers and who are some of your teachers that are having challenges in their teaching in your area. And based off of the teachers that we had, I went and gave them this IPT 15 with the first part of the study, and the second part I went and videotaped their recording so that we could actually look and see, okay, first of all, are they effective or ineffective, and are they demonstrating some of these social skills as well? So based off of the IPT 15, what I found was that exemplary teachers actually did better. They scored higher than challenge teachers did on their ability to understand what's going on in social situations. But the question of that is, does that necessarily mean that they have social intelligence, they have social skills? Because again, just because we can decode it, just because we can see it, doesn't mean that we're actually able to use that to our advantage in the classroom. So with the second part of the study, I took those video recording excerpts of each one of them and had some outside evaluators, I believe about 80 of them, actually watch the videotapes, and I asked them to do two things. One, tell me were they effective or ineffective? And then I want you to tell me why. I want you to give me one main attribute that is the reason why you thought they were effective or ineffective. And what I found was fascinating. Out of 1,008 responses that were given, 86% involved social attributes. And when we looked at comparing those with whether or not those teachers were effective or not, teachers that were viewed as effective teachers, the main attributes that reflected that were effective social skills. And teachers that were ineffective, the number one reason that they cited they were ineffective were ineffective social skills, with actually classroom management being ineffective classroom management being the one that stuck out the most. So if we have some evidence that shows social intelligence is connected to effective teaching, the question is, one, can we develop it? Is it something we can teach? And if it is, when or how do we go about learning these skills? Well, we know from other effective teaching techniques that we have in the literature that good teachers, effective teachers, have sequential patterns, teaching cycles, teaching loops. They complete instruction that they're giving to their students. That they have positive and specific feedback that they give to their students. They are very efficient with their use of time. They have very fast pacing to keep their rehearsal, to keep their class moving forward. But they have an intensity or a magnitude about their instruction. And they have a delivery that engages the students. The other thing that is encouraging about this is that all of these teaching techniques have been shown to be increased or learned. It's not necessarily that people have it or they don't. Can some teachers, some individuals have a natural disposition to do some of these inherently? Yes. But can all teachers improve and learn on these? Sure they can. Which begs the question then, what about social skills, social intelligence? Can it follow the same rule that these other techniques follow? So when we start looking at the process of becoming a teacher, one of the things that's very clear is that all teachers go through a number of stages in their development. We seem to follow kind of a sequential process that we go through. It might not everyone go through it in the same manner. We might skip a step, go back and forth a little bit, but we seem to follow this pattern in our process of becoming a good teacher. And pre-service teachers, and I need to put the term pre-service in quotations because what we mean by that are teachers that aren't licensed yet. Teachers who are here at ECU studying, working on their classes, getting ready to do their student teaching, about to go out and be licensed teachers. Pre-service teachers are first concerned with themselves. Well, sure, we kind of know that from college students anyway, they're rather concerned with themselves. But when it comes to their teaching, yeah, they're first concerned with themselves. How am I doing as a teacher? Do I plan my lessons well? Am I doing what I need to do? And they're really not worried about what's going on with the students or the classroom because they're so focused on their internal concerns. But as we gain confidence in our own teaching, what we find is that those concerns will start to shift from what we're doing internally to what's going on externally. As we are more comfortable in the class, as I feel like I know what I'm doing, I can start to worry about whether or not the students are doing what they should be doing. Are they learning? Am I actually putting this in a way that they understand what I'm talking about? So the question that I posed after this for the next study is, well, does social skills, social intelligence follow the same type of process? And so to look at this, the next study that I tried to get into dealt with the student teaching. If social intelligence, if social skills are something that can be developed, let's go back to the earliest time that they have actually teaching and see if it starts to develop at that point. It seems like a good starting place. And for most of our students, to go out and spend 15 weeks with students every day where they have nothing else to focus on, usually is the first time when they're working with students in any large setting. So I grabbed 66 of our music education student teachers over a 4-year period to participate in the study, to look at that specific thing. And I gave them the same IPT 15 that I had given in the previous study to kind of measure as like a pre and post test, if you will. We gave it to them right before they went out their student teaching, and then we gave it to them right when they came back from their student teaching to see what had developed. Had they improved on that? But then I also wanted to know from their own word of mouth, what did they feel like they improved on? What skills did they feel like they got better on? And to see how many of those were related to either social or non-social skills. So I asked them to please list the top 3 skills that they felt they'd improved or developed the most on. So in looking at the IPT 15, what do we find? There were no differences between how well they did before they went and when they came back. In fact, they did slightly worse when they came back. Now, when I mean slightly worse, just a hair out of 15, out of 15 points, just slightly worse. So the question is, well, did they get worse with their social skills? I don't know. Or did perhaps were they focused on other things, as the research literature might show? And that was the question to get to. When I looked at their top 3 skills they developed or improved on the most, pretty even, with non-social skills being slightly more prevalent than social skills. What was really telling is when we broke these down, when compared to were they teaching skills, were they personal skills, or were they musical skills, teaching skills accounted for almost 50% of what they learned. Here's an example of some of the top comments that were given. And you can see that each comment, the number of responses, and then whether it was a social skill, and it fell under the category. So as you can see kind of here from the skills, most of them are falling under non-social skills, and most of them are involving teaching and or personal skills. But it doesn't hold true for everything. Communication was a social skill that was listed by several students, and relating to students, one that we've already talked about as being part of social intelligence, is related, was listed by students as being improved during the student teaching process. So what does all this mean? Well, first of all, this seems to be pretty consistent with what we know from the research literature, right? Our pre-service teachers were focused on their own personal and teaching skills and less on what was going on around them. However, there were several student teachers that specifically responded that they developed and improved on the following social skills, and I put these in quotations so that you would understand that these were actually their terms that they used, that they felt like they improved on. So to answer the question, was social intelligence developed during the student teaching experience? Well, the answer is no. And yes. What do I mean by that? Well, if we talk again about the fact that novice teachers focus on their internal concerns first and then move to external concerns, this typically seemed what was going on, a lot of focus on the internal concerns of their teaching. But because some of the students actually commented on focusing on those external concerns, on developing social skills and working on relating with other students, on working on how they were communicating with their students, there was some, or I should say there were several students who actually did spend time during the student teaching focusing on learning those skills. So for some individuals, the student teaching experience actually did help them work on these skills. There was social intelligence developed. But for the majority of the student teachers, their focus really never shifted from their own internal teaching concerns. So, and asked about what we were designed to talk about today here with the presentation. How does this impact my own teaching? Knowing all of this now, what do I do to take this in the classroom? And my answer to that is it impacts it in every possible way. If I'm working with freshman music students all the way through graduate students, whether we're talking about working with classes where students are learning about the instruments and learning the ins and outs of how to play them, about how to teach them, about how to get into rehearsals and be in classrooms and be in front of large groups of people, my goal is the same no matter what class that I enter. And that's that I can teach so efficiently and effectively that they're going to be able to master the skills and knowledge quickly so that they can then move past this internal concern of my own teaching, of my own knowledge, and be able to get outside of myself with what the students are doing. If I can speed up the process in my own teaching, for them to master this better so that learning how to describe musical concepts or instruments or rehearsing becomes as habitual as tying one's shoelaces, then they're going to have much more success when they get out in front of students and being able to master those initial teaching fears, those initial teaching concerns, and can be much more effective in establishing positive relationships with their students, with starting to pick up those social cues of what's going on in the classroom. I also translate this to in working with our seniors before they're going out into student teaching to understand that effective classroom management really is social intelligence. That if you're understanding what the students are doing, if you're understanding which students you need to immediately address and which students you, quite frankly, need to ignore because they're just looking for attention, that you're using that awareness of what's going on in the classroom to help guide what you're going to do as a teacher and make yourself more effective. So when I was asked about the topic that I was going to teach today, about how we were going to integrate research, scholarly activities into our teaching, my first thought went back to our research classes that I was taking in graduate school. And for many of us, as we remember those, it was kind of a scarier time when you were reading through journals and trying to remember jargon, you were trying to remember terms, and you're trying to figure out all these fancy words that people were using that had a vocabulary that was just infinitely higher than yours were. You were trying to figure out statistical tests and trying to figure out how to set up your control in your experimental group, and you were learning the ins and outs of all the things that happen with research. But in that moment, I remember having mentors that stopped and said, remember why it is that we do research. The point is because it forms a symbiotic relationship with our teaching. The whole reason we do research is to inform us, to help us be better instructors, and vice versa. And there was an analogy that sticks with me that I heard several years ago, but I think is very appropriate for today, especially given the title of our symposium today, which is celebrating the synergy between research and teaching. And it goes a little like this. That research is to teaching as sins to confession. If you don't participate in the first one, then you have nothing to say in the other. I consider it to be a distinct privilege to be a part of not only the College of Fine Arts Communication and School of Music, but also a music education department that does both of those very well. And I don't think it's any shock that being good researchers, being good educators, forms that symbiotic relationship between the two. So again, I just want to thank those for this award, this nomination, and thank you so much for your time today.
You say, it's a vote, it's a tradition.
Yep, absolutely. Michelle, she said my department participates in both. Was that the same confession? I said absolutely. But I think a lot more to say. I appreciate it.
Right after